All right, everybody, welcome back. I'm Jacob, and I'm going to do a bit of a light recap of week 8, but mostly I'm just doing this to really dive into the Packers wide receiver situation and why it's just frustrating to me as a fan that this team is likely not going to win a playoff game unless we play somebody from the NFC East, that is. And I'm recording this the night after we beat the crap out of the San Francisco 49ers. So I don't mean to be all doom and gloom. We did just win, get a little revenge against the 49ers practice squad. But I'll start by looking at their embarrassing, humiliating loss to the Minnesota Vikings in week 8. They lost 28-22. It came down to the last play of the game. Rodgers had a final shot to Davante Adams. I saw in the All-22. He was looking to kind of throw across the field. Just held it for a split second too long. Got hit from behind. Strip sack. Game over. But I want to talk about what led to that. And not just the run defense being terrible, Dalvin Cook being an absolute god that game. Terrible run defense is a staple of Packers fandom at this point. But this is why you need more than one good receiver, no matter how good that one receiver is. Like Davante Adams. Adams had 3 touchdowns this game. Even though that, Zimmer made it a point to at least limit him. The reason you need more than one good wide receiver is for when you fall behind, when your game script gets thrown off. And when the Packers fell behind this game, I'm just like, well, that's it. I know it came down to the last play of the game, but if I'm losing by 14 at the start of the fourth quarter, and I have Aaron Rodgers, especially playing the way he is, and I'm like, it's probably over, that should never be a thing. So let's break down how the receiver situation in this game hurt them, and then I'll talk about their inaction at the trade deadline and talk about why I still have all these concerns even after a convincing win against the 49ers practice squad. So to put it simply, no wide receiver on the team except Davante Adams can catch the ball. Marquez Valdes-Scantling, I would not be surprised if he has more drops than actual receptions. It's insane. And there were some crucial drops this game because middle of the third quarter, Packers were down by 7. They're pushing into field goal range at this point. Everybody had led a scoring drive at this point. They're just looking to respond. Equanimeous St. Brown, our third-year, sixth-round pick, had 2 crucial drops. Well, the first one was a drop. The second one was, I expect you to come down with that if you're as physically imposing as he is and you get drafted for your ball skills. He's 6'5", and let me see how... He's 6'5", 214. And the first one was when Aaron Rodgers threw a laser over the middle of the field. And this is why Aaron Rodgers is still an elite quarterback. He's throwing these guys open. If nobody's open, he's like, okay, I'm just going to put it in the one spot where my guy, and only my guy, can get it. And you cannot physically, and defenders cannot physically get to the ball unless they just commit pass interference. I get that the one on third down was a tough catch, but in the NFL, if you get two hands on it, you should catch it. I get that it was freezing cold that game, but when Aaron Rodgers throws you open, you have to take that. You have to take advantage of it. He's creating a huge opportunity to make something out of nothing. And you have to have guys that are able to capitalize. And then the fourth down, just Rodgers had Equanimeous in the end zone as he was running for his life. Threw it up. It was a touch underthrown, I will say. And it looked like Harrison Smith might have gotten a hand in there. But this is another case where Equanimeous St. Brown had two hands on the football. That should be a catch. I get that it's not the easiest catch in the world. But in the biggest moments, you just have to... When Rodgers is doing all this stuff, you have to just find a way to capitalize on his greatness. Something the Packers front office has failed to do, and coaches for the most part until LaFleur came in, have failed to do for more than a decade now. Jeez, that's bad. And then right after, 1.5 St. Brown drops. It was the Dalvin Cook 50-yard screen for a touchdown where, my God, we can't tackle. And just... I don't know where to begin. If Adams is doubled, we're screwed. That's it. Nobody else can get open. So when Rodgers just throws them open because he has to, because they're not open, they just can't catch. It's ridiculous. Like, Marquez Valdes-Scantling, his hands are so bad. He's such a roller coaster. It's so frustrating. And if he's used more sparingly, doesn't get as much exposure, I can get behind him as a role player. But if he's your number 2 receiver, that's a huge problem because he doesn't have hands. I feel like I'm almost running out of things to say at this point because, again, teams are just daring. Well, in the playoffs, teams will just dare the Packers to have more than one good receiver, which they don't. Keep in mind, the Vikings have played the Packers twice. Week 1, Rodgers shredded them. And I bet you anything Mike Zimmer looked back at the tape and he was like, oh, they only have one good receiver. They didn't draft one in the offseason. If we just limit Adams, and we can even trust our extremely young secondary to cover these guys. Well, anyway, I'm probably going on too long with this one game, but now that I hope I made clear just how the lack of a wide receiver really hurts them. Because think about it, that's also what Tampa Bay did. The Packers run more two-backs. Well, they used to run more two-back sets with Aaron Jones and Jamal Adams. Why did I just say Jamal Adams? Jamal Williams. So Aaron Jones and Jamal Williams are a lot of time on the field at the same time. And that's just by getting your best players on the field. So the Packers didn't run a lot of 3 receiver sets. It was more a lot of 2 receiver sets. But when you're trailing and you just need to come out in 11 personnel, shotgun, and just start chucking the ball downfield to get back in this game, they don't have anybody who can catch. You might as well double or triple Adams, put one person on MVS. You can leave Marquez Valdez on EQ. You can leave Marquez Valdez Scantling uncovered because it's a 50-50 chance if he's going to catch the ball if he's wide open anyway. Okay, now the trade deadline. They were in talks, for context, they were in talks to get Texans receiver Will Fuller. And for reference, the Texans stink this year. They're 1-6. The Packers just beat the crap out of them. I think it was week 7 that it was. Rodgers and Adams just had a field day because Texans didn't figure out he was a really good receiver. But anyway, they were in talks to get Will Fuller, who is a deep threat. Wide receiver for the Houston Texans, who runs a 40 time of 4.33. So, yeah, he's fast. For reference, our quote-unquote deep threat without hands, Marquez Valdez Scantling, he runs a 4.37. So they're pretty similar speeds. Both are wicked fast. I'd say MVS is probably the fastest receiver Rodgers has really had time to play with, at least in the NFL. So you need that element of explosion when you're down by 14 against a division rival at home in the cold. If the Packers had Will Fuller, I'm leaning towards that they win this game. Defense stiffened up in the fourth quarter. They remembered how to tackle. You just need that element of explosion. I sound like a broken record, but the Packers front office just has not done this for like the past 3 years. And rumor is that Packers head coach Matt LaFleur wanted Will Fuller. Matt LaFleur, I think he's a really good coach. He's not stupid. He knows that they need an element of explosion when they're down, again, when they're down 14 at home in the fourth quarter against a division rival, and they need Rodgers to just start balling out, chucking the ball downfield to somebody who will actually catch it. Will Fuller can be that guy. And let's see. He's just like, but that's mostly what he is. He's a solid deep threat. He's had a pretty good season thus far, and he stayed healthy, which he's had pretty major injury concerns throughout most of his career. He can't really stay healthy, which is the one knock against at least the Packers trading for Will Fuller. It's true, he does have legitimate injury concerns, but you gotta at least try. You gotta give him a shot. He stayed healthy this year up to this point. Why not give Rodgers another target unless you're just waiting for Allen Lazard to come back? And can you imagine if the Packers had Devontae Adams, Will Fuller, and Adam Lazard, depending on whether Lazard's there 2 or 3 or which with Fuller. But then that moves MVS down to your 4th receiver as a role player, a backup deep threat, which is good. You don't ask your players to do too much. But, again, rumor is that Packers general manager Brian Gutekunst was not willing to trade for Will Fuller because he did not want to give up a second-round pick. Where do I start with that? First of all, Brian, your drafting is bad. You butchered the draft last year. It's not that you didn't get good players, but you could have gotten so much more. Like, you draft the future in Jordan Love, who the jury is out on right now, we'll only know if he's good in like 2 or 3 years. And then you draft a backup running back, A.J. Dillon. Well, actually, a third-string running back in A.J. Dillon, who's a good player. He is. And if you got him in the 5th round, where he was probably going to get drafted anyway, like, that's a really good pick, you know? We did also kind of need depth at running back. And then you spend your 3rd-round pick on a tight end fullback hybrid, who you also probably could have gotten in, like, the 5th, 6th round. So, Brian, when you don't really understand value or the needs of your team and didn't draft a wide receiver in the deepest wide receiver class pretty much ever, don't tell me you're going to really make use of that precious 2nd round pick and you're just going to waste it on a non-receiver, or even if they do draft a receiver, they're not going to be as good as Will Fuller immediately, probably. The Packers have always had a stubborn draft and develop philosophy. Draft picks are king. We do not give up draft picks no matter what. And this is maddening. You see that other front offices are much, much more aggressive. The Seahawks traded for Jamal Adams. They gave up 2 firsts. The Rams, well, you can debate whether this was too aggressive, traded 2 first-round picks for Jalen Ramsey. The Buffalo Bills traded a first and a few other late-round picks for Stephon Diggs. When you have a chance to get these guys, you have to get them. And I'm not saying Will Fuller's as good as Stephon Diggs. He's not. But if Fuller can fill that void as a deep threat, you just have to take it. You can't you can't just give these guys 3 years to learn how to catch. You have a Hall of Fame quarterback. You have to win now. And I get the Jordan Love pick, which is to pick for the future. But if you're going to pick for the future, you better help your current quarterback in the rest of the draft. So, I can't wait to see what the Packers do with their 2nd round pick. I'd almost put money on, what are they going to spend on? Another running back? Are they going to spend it on, I don't know, are they going to spend it on, running back would probably be the only one that, we don't really need, which, again, kind of depends on what we do with Aaron Jones this offseason. And then we get to the good, which was last night, where we beat the 49ers practice squad 34-17. They scored a garbage touchdown on the last play of the game. And again, Rodgers and Adams looked amazing. Rodgers, the first touchdown to Adams was just such a beautiful throw. Again, you can't place it on the back shoulder any better than that. And great catch by Adams. And the roller coaster continues with Marquez Valdes-Scantling. Every time you just hope he's going to turn a corner. Then he doesn't. Then he does. Or has he yet? I don't know. So it was on a 3rd and 4 early in the game. We were only up by 4 at that point, I believe. Rodgers moves around the pocket, throws to MVS on a shallow crosser that they've run out of I've seen them run out of a bunch of linemen, a lot this season. And Marquez, he has it, pinned to his chest, his numbers, and he just drops it. And I was just so beyond livid that this man was their number 2 wide receiver, that when Adams was covered, they expected Rodgers to throw to a football player that doesn't have hands. It was probably the worst hands I've seen in a Green Bay uniform. I was like honestly like so mad that I barely noticed that we picked off Nick Mullins on whatever the next drive was. And then we get to the good that MVS had last night. Because I don't want to like tear into the guy. I obviously want him to succeed. I just think he's a role player suffering from overexposure. You can take the load off a bit if he's the backup deep threat to a guy like, I don't know, Will Fuller. Then he could gradually gain some confidence and develop as time goes on. That'd be ideal. You don't ask him to do too much. You gotta be realistic with where he's at right now, which is maddeningly inconsistent. But anyway, let's get to... he had 2 touchdowns this game. Good for him. And the first one was a 50-yard bomb from Rodgers where they got him pretty much isolated against... I'm looking at the film right now. 36 on the Niners, who I believe that's Marcel Harris. And Harris kind of got caught flat-footed, and Marquez Valdes-Scantling with his 4.3 speed just blew right by him, was so wide open. And that's the explosion that I'm talking about with a deep threat for the Green Bay Packers when they get down. I mean, he'll do this maybe every other week, and you'll be like, yes, that's it. I'd also like to point out the great play calling that was for matching Marquez Valdes-Scantling's 4.3 speed with 49ers safety Marcel Harris, who runs a 4.6. Yes, a 4.6. But Rodgers was licking his chops before the snap even started. But anyway, he gets wide open. I swear I saw MVS drop that ball. I don't know if it's just PTSD from all the other drops he's had in his career, but I swear I saw the ball bounce off his hands in the end zone. My vision started to turn red at that point. I was just going to be so mad. And then he's still holding the ball in the end zone. I'm like, thank goodness. Holy crap. The roller coaster continues, and then his next touchdown, Rodgers finds him in the back of the end zone from the 1 yard line where they both had to kind of improvise a little bit, which is good, and you want these receivers to also know where to go when the play breaks down. Encouraging signs for MVS. I just need to see one game where he doesn't... I just need to see... It seems like 1 in every 5 targets he has a bad drop, so good night for him. He had 1 terrible drop, but I just hope this is 2 touchdowns or a confidence boost for him and he can stay consistent, which would negate the Packers needing to trade for Will Fuller, but they should be all in this year pretty much. Aaron Jones might be gone this offseason. Maybe Jamal Williams too. They just expect Rodgers to carry them like he did pretty much every year before that. It's just almost unfair how much help other quarterbacks get when Rodgers has gotten almost jack over his entire career. You had Mike McCarthy for 10 seasons, and makes me so happy that people realize that Mike McCarthy is a bad coach, is indeed a bad coach. Rodgers carried him for 10 years. This absolutely blows my mind that they somehow won a Super Bowl in that time span and went to 3 NFC championships, but and moving to Aaron Rodgers briefly, he's been playing at an elite level this year. I know people like to claim that Rodgers is washed, whatever, and I will give some credence to those because in 2018, in charting his film from 2018 and 2019, he just looked good, not great. He was just not seeing the field as well. His consistency dropped off. He just wasn't quite what he once was, but it's not like the arm strength dipped. It's not like he couldn't make those jaw-dropping plays anymore. So it's like, okay, I think it feels like he's still got something left at the tank, and this year, maybe the Jordan Love pick kind of gave him a kick in the butt, but he's been playing like Aaron Rodgers again this year. Man, moving on, now that I've complained about the Packers for about almost half an hour, back to week 8. I'll just breeze through his games briefly. The Thursday night one, Falcons-Panthers, Atlanta didn't blow it. That's most of what I could say. Teddy didn't look right after he got hit. On the sidelines, I'm like, this dude has a concussion. He has to. I'm not sure what else to really... Let me just say that I don't think Teddy throws that terrible game-ending pick if he's not concussed. Like, that doesn't just seem like a pick that Teddy Bridgewater would throw. Yeah, but I still like Teddy Bridgewater. He could... I think the Panthers do kind of look at maybe some options to really elevate them to the promised land. Teddy's fine. He's fun. Good for him that he's back to back to being a starter in this league after what he went through. They're signed with him for 3 years, so I don't know if they're gonna keep him for 2, trade him the third, or they might keep him for all 3, and he might just be a backup that third year potentially to some quarterbacks in next year's class. I'm just interested by the Panthers. Their defense has gotten better. And, like, I think I'm in on the Panthers with Matt Rule being their future coach, and Joe Brady's probably not going to be around much longer. He'll probably get picked up by some team in the offseason. He's just too hot a name to not be a head coach next year. Anyway, Falcons, they're not going to get Trevor Lawrence at this point. I really wanted them to. Can you imagine in 2 years Trevor Lawrence throwing to Calvin Ridley? If I were the Falcons, I'd just trade Ryan and Julio Jones, but they seem to want to win. Again, why do they want to win? I just don't get it. By the time your team's good again, Matt Ryan's going to be 40 years old. And that's assuming things go well. So I just trade him to, say, the Niners. Well, I would have traded him. The trade deadline is passed. And the Packers didn't get a receiver. Anyway, if I'm the Falcons, I would have traded him to the 49ers. I know this was before Jimmy G got hurt, but, hindsight's 20/20. Matt Ryan to be reunited with Kyle Shanahan during that MVP season he had in 2016. The Falcons probably get a good haul back. And I'm not sure where they send Julio. Julio's awesome anywhere he goes, honestly. I'm just not enthusiastic about them trying to ride an aging Matt Ryan, whose play has dipped a little bit, to when he's 40. Like, I'm looking for a future exceptional quarterback. I'm not gonna ride the slow, steady decline of Matt Ryan. It's just more me talking about the future of these two teams. Moving on to the Patriots and Bills. I complain about the Packers receivers a lot, and that's basically the premise for this episode, but at least they have Devontae Adams. The Patriots have almost nobody. My gosh. It's pretty bad. Cam Newton, I thought, played okay this week after he was pretty terrible against the 49ers. The receivers are just not much to talk about. Talk about the Packers receivers never getting open. These receivers just can't get open. It's ugly. And Cam did all he could this week. He had that one crucial fumble, but I don't think they're in that game unless Cam is commanding the line of scrimmage. The Bills side, I thought Josh Allen was fine. I know I'm looking at his numbers. His numbers, I see, weren't great, but that doesn't matter. I still thought he played rather well. All things considered, this is a Bill Belichick-led defense after all. Josh Allen, I think he has seemed to dropped off from how he was playing early in the season to now. I think we're really finding out where Josh Allen is. He's probably like he's probably a top 12 quarterback fairly easily. I mean, it just consistency is a bit of a thing with him. He just makes maybe one too many misses or misreads for me to really call him well, he is amazing, but to really call him elite, but he's great. I don't want to talk down on Josh Allen. He hasn't necessarily played amazing the last few games. I anticipate that'll rebound, but he just hasn't quite hit the heights from the first few weeks when he was just absolutely balling. Moving on to Titans Bengals. Ladies and gentlemen, Joe Burrow is a top 10 quarterback, and that's that. That's all I can say. He is absolutely amazing on film. And I frankly don't think that the Bengals really win this game without Joe Burrow. I get that the defense played well and balled out. Yes, obviously. Burrow is basically a mobile Tom Brady. He's a Tom Brady if Tom Brady didn't run as slow as your grandma. He has pretty much everything you look for in a potentially future elite quarterback. He might be almost there now. He has the brain. He rarely makes mistakes. I know people will point to the game-ending pick on the final drive he had against Indianapolis, but if you just look at his play-to-play consistency, that plays an event. Obviously, that pick was itself bad. That ended the drive, ended the game. But Burrow is a guy who hates losing, and I'm sure, I don't want to speak for him, I don't know the guy, but I'm sure no one was more sick after that pick than Joe Burrow. And like Tom Brady, he's just like obsessed with winning and obsessed with football. And he's just fun to watch. His attention to detail, his accuracy is consistently almost perfect. Like, consistently precise. Whereas Josh Allen might be able to make a few more throws than Joe Burrow, like just in terms of like 60 yards down the field, flick of the wrist for Josh Allen. Burrow's more consistent. I can't remember the last time I really seen him throw a football to the wrong shoulder of a receiver, or he tried to force the ball before, well, aside from that game-ending pick in the Colts game. I just don't... His ball placement, I think, is what really makes me say that he's a mobile Tom Brady, because Tom Brady, what really makes Tom Brady an elite quarterback, about as much as his attention to detail, his smarts, his preparation, is the accuracy downfield, which comes from their perfect footwork, tight mechanics, maximizing their good, not great arms. And that's what's, well, we'll get into maybe Brady later, but I'll just say that ball placement downfield and manipulating the pocket really is what separates the Tom Brady's from the Jimmy Garoppolo's. So Burrow is their guy. I still want to kidnap him from Cincinnati and take him to a team with an offensive line. Indianapolis, maybe, when they're done with Rivers. Who knows? Imagine maybe Tampa when... Well, maybe not Tampa. Brady will play until he's 60 years old. Just anywhere with a good offensive line. Because, especially early in the season, watching Joe Burrow film was just an exercise in anxiety for me. I'm quite surprised he was still standing straight up after 4 weeks. I think that speaks to his toughness, but if you have NFL Game Pass, I encourage you to watch the Bengals offensive line just so you can see what a truly atrocious offensive line looks like. I think I ran out of synonyms for the word terrible when I was talking about the Packers receiving core. Okay, I'll just leave it at that. Now that I've spent enough time praising Joe Burrow, let's talk about the Titans. To me, they might be a smidge overrated. I don't think they're as good as the Chiefs. We saw that they're probably about as good as the Steelers. They did almost beat them. That game was pretty close. They fought back pretty hard. I just feel good about where this team's at, and I'm almost not sure what else they can do aside from just kind of their defense hopefully getting better as the season goes along. I'm just not sure what else they can do to really improve their team right now. They've got a good line. Derrick Henry has been Derrick Henry. Ryan Tannehill has been really good this season. He's probably one of the 15 best quarterbacks in the league, and he's returning value on the contract they gave him this offseason for 4 years. I believe less than $30 million a year. For the way he's playing, that's looking like a bargain. And he's got a solid arm. He's very accurate. Ryan Tannehill's impressed me this year. He's had some shaky games, like against the Steelers. But overall, you're not looking to replace Tannehill anytime soon unless he falls off a cliff. All right, moving on. Raiders, Browns. Oh, goodness. I spent a lot of time talking about the quarterbacks. But I just have to in this case with the Browns. Do they move on from Baker? I would probably consider it. I think Baker and Darnold, for that matter, just get a little too much hate for the dumb picks they throw. When people just look at lowlights of their bafflingly stupid interceptions, you think, oh, why are they starting? They're starting for a reason. they do too many things well. They make too many tight window throws for them just to straight up get benched. They do too much good for their teams to just get straight up benched. That being said, just with all their dumb turnovers, they're entering that Jameis Winston territory. And I still think Winston is an NFL starter somewhere, but not franchise quarterback, not the answer. The Browns are a good team, and I think Baker is honestly holding them back right now. He is in the perfect scenario. He's in the perfect scenario for his skill set. The play action heavy, give him a clean pocket, and let him rip it. And he's still not been consistent. He was amazing against the Bengals, and that game winner he had to Donovan Peoples-Jones, 6th-round pick out of Michigan. That's the Baker you want to see. It's just, again, it's not. Maybe you should see that like 3 times a year if you're lucky. So in the NFL, if you want to really compete for a Super Bowl, you got to have a top tier quarterback. Maybe not top tier, but like a good to great quarterback at least. You can't just be average. You can't just be okay. They have to do some things really well and cut down on the mistakes. Baker hasn't been able to cut down on the mistakes. I consider moving on if I'm Cleveland. And this is interesting because I won't take credit for this, but YouTube NFL film analyst Brett Coleman put out in a tweet a month ago maybe that the Browns should take a look at Zach Wilson, quarterback from BYU, if they're not sure on Baker. And he really sold me. A little side note on Zach Wilson. Zach Wilson is really, really talented. He might be a mini Josh Allen. Anyway, we'll talk more about Zach Wilson in draft season, but I've really liked what I've seen so far from him. Moving on to the Raiders, I think we can all agree that they're pretty good. Again, though, is Derek Carr the answer? I think the Raiders should at least consider alternate options if something better comes up. I think that's why they signed Mariota to a hefty backup contract. Anyway, though, well, their defense has been surprisingly okay. They get shredded at times because of their lack of talent, but they're all playing hard. Gruden's got his grinders. They're fine. They might win a playoff game. You just hope Derek Carr can really put together and just string a couple elite performances together for the playoffs. I think that's really what it comes down to because Josh Jacobs hasn't really produced as much, but he's still he still looks like a darn good running back. Nelson Aguilar has kind of had a career revival. He didn't do anything in this game. He did have a drop this game, I believe. but he's had a career revival. He's doing things. They have Henry Ruggs, Brian Edwards. They're interesting. I think their ceiling just totally depends on Derek Carr, though. Moving on to Colts-Lions. The Lions have done this like every week. They jump out to they start hot in the first 15 minutes of the game. Then their opponent just starts rattling off points on their defense. And the Lions just stagnate. That's pretty much been the case with about every game they've played this year. Happened week 1 against the Bears, week 2 against the Packers. Lions gotta consider moving on from Matt Patricia. He's had 3 years to get this defense to be good. They have not been good the last 3 years. Matthew Stafford's carrying the load again. He was amazing against the Falcons. The primary reason they won the game, aside from Atlanta being Atlanta. But he can't do everything. He's not Superman. I mean, he's super talented. He's a very, very good quarterback, but he's not, Aaron Rodgers. Colts, though, well, it's kind of like what we said about the Raiders. They're pretty good. What can make them great? I was really kind of hoping that Jonathan Taylor for the Colts would be, like, one of the best, like, break out in, like, a Josh Jacobs way. Be an amazing rookie running back. He hasn't really been that. He's been a little underwhelming. And word came out recently that he's been dealing with a minor ankle injury. So if he can get better and rediscover that real, like, track speed and explosiveness from Wisconsin, then I think you can really be talking about the Colts. Phillip Rivers has been solid this season for most of the year. He single-handedly cost them that game against the Browns. He was hot garbage that game. But other than that, he's been fairly smart. Arm isn't what it used to be, obviously. Arm's not very good, but he's still fairly accurate, and he's working well with the younger receivers. He still hasn't really seemed to gel with T.Y. Hilton. But this offense just looks good. Rivers is one of the smartest quarterbacks in the league in terms of just knowing where the ball needs to go before the snap. Where he throws his picks is when nothing's there and he just tries to be a hero, which can be even more disastrous when his physical talent isn't what it used to be. So I didn't really learn anything new about the Colts or Lions this week. I mean, I think they are what they are. Colts are good. Lions are a frustrating mess. Patricia's just on the hot seat. Moving on to Jets-Chiefs. I don't want to spend too much time on the Jets because they're the Jets. I will say for the Jets that I think Sam Darnold can be a franchise quarterback, just not here. Because, frankly, Sam Darnold is the only reason that I could bring myself to watch the Jets this week. Otherwise, they roll out Joe Flacco, I'm like, nah, why would I watch that game? Like, Joe Flacco on the worst team in the league. Why? At least Sam Darnold's an intriguing young quarterback who can be fun to watch. I think there's still something there with Darnold. If he goes to a better team, I do believe in him. I'm thinking like a team like the Colts. Where he can maybe sit behind Rivers for a year And the thing is, their play styles, strengths and weaknesses are not are kind of similar because they both make some stupid mistakes. They'll throw 15 picks or so in a 16 game season, probably at least. But they're very smart quarterbacks. I think Sam is under the radar a smart pre-snap quarterback. And again, his picks just come from him forcing things, trying to be a hero, like Rivers. Difference is Sam is 10 times as more mobile than Philip Rivers is right now, has a much better arm. I think Sam still has some stuff to work out with ball placement downfield. But I think it can be to where he can still be like a franchise level quarterback. So I just talked about Sam Darnold for the Jets. I'm not going to talk about anybody else. Adam Gase has to go. Unless they want Trevor Lawrence, in which case, the minute they go 0-16 or whatever, like, just fire Adam Gase immediately. They cannot bring him back next year, recently Joe Douglas said something like, we're standing by Adam Gase. I don't know if that's smoke or not. I'm not in the building, obviously. I can't read these people's minds. But I would just hope it's smoke and that they're going to fire Gase once they win the Trevor Lawrence sweepstakes, because I think they might just be keeping him for that. But anyway, okay, just to get the taste of the Jets out of my mouth, I'll talk about the Chiefs. Mahomes is still one of the greatest football players I've ever seen. He's ridiculous. I'm not sure if he's really the MVP. I think that's still Russell Wilson. The Chiefs are still the gold standard for the league right now. Defense isn't like top notch, but they're fine. And with this offense is just, what do you do? And they signed Le'Veon Bell just because they wanted to. And I'm sure Le'Veon Bell also chose the Chiefs partly because he's just ring chasing. But it's just another playmaker. When I think about that, I think about the Packers just total inaction. I'm not saying you have to bring in like Le'Veon Bell specifically, but just any wide receivers. Moving on, Rams, Dolphins, and Tua Tagovailoa's first start. Tagovailoa. I think I got that. Hopefully. I'll talk about the Rams first because Jared Goff was awful. My gosh. First 3 quarters, basically until like garbage time, he was the reason they lost this game. Just like, again, I've run out of adjectives right now for terrible, or synonyms. And what the Dolphins were doing on defense, very interesting, and I think it really highlights some of the flaws with Jared Goff. The Dolphins ran a lot of zero blitz, or cover zero, with no safety back. They run a lot of man coverage anyway, so they just manned up receivers and blitzed the house. And Goff looked rattled. He looked just lost against the blitz. And a big problem that I'm having with Goff right now is that he's just too impatient. He doesn't take what the defense gives him. Sometimes he really thinks he can just pass with impunity, and he can't always. So, yeah, I'm not so sure with Goff. I think if McVay schemes up stuff for him, that can kind of hide his flaws, but otherwise not so enthusiastic about him. I found this hilarious. The Rams' backfield is still a total committee. Darrell Henderson, 8 carries. Malcolm Brown, 10 carries. Cam Akers, 9 carries. And even their 4th running back, Robert Woods, I'm just kidding, he's a receiver, but he still had a couple carries anyway. a committee is probably the best way to go in today's NFL. If at least if especially if you know you're probably going to make the playoffs, you want your best guys to be healthy. Now let's just talk about the Dolphins. I'll talk about Tua. I thought it was okay. I mean, what else can you really say? He didn't have to do anything. They might as well have had a wet plant at quarterback because their defense just destroyed Jared Goff. I found it interesting because it seems like the Dolphins are just putting Tua out now to see if he's going to be good, and if he's terrible, then they can potentially draft a quarterback in the 2021 draft. I think it's okay. I think that's a solid approach. You just got to see what you got into, but I learned basically nothing from this game. He had one fumble early on, I believe, that was just not good. He just needs to sense that a little better. He had one really good throw to Gesicki that was technically incomplete, but that's where Tua showed off some downfield accuracy, which was a plus for him coming out of Bama. That's what we want to see. Gesicki couldn't really bring it in, but anyway, just a good contested ball throw, good ball placement by Tua, I thought. Other than that, yeah, that's it. Well, I guess we could talk about the defense and Brian Flores, because Flores' game plan was pretty much a textbook for how you want to beat the Rams. If you want to know how to beat the Rams, if you want to make Jared Goff look as bad as he did last that game, just cover 0. I'm sure Flores knew he was playing an impatient quarterback. And so he's just like, he's not going to take what's given to him. So I'll just cover deep and send the house and rattle him. Because the Dolphins don't have a great pass rush. They have an amazing secondary. My goodness, Xavier Howard is a beast. I forgot they have Byron Jones. Dolphins are interesting. They're actually pushing potentially for a wild card. I don't know if they'll compete with the Bills, but if Tua is like good, they can make the playoffs, which I'm excited to see that. We just need to. We still have really no idea if Tua's any good. I liked it coming out more than Justin Herbert, which we'll get to later. Now Steelers Ravens. Speaking of not very good quarterback performances, Lamar Jackson was not very good this game. Just got rattled by the Steelers. The same thing happened last year when he played them early in the season last year. It was that game that went to overtime. Steelers know how to send pressure, know how to rattle them. And that Steelers defense is scary. My goodness. That front seven is probably a nightmare for opposing offensive coordinators. They play so physical, they play so tough. You can't really run on them, even though J.K. Dobbins was pretty great this week. Steelers' offense is pretty solid. They have an embarrassment of riches at wide receiver. They have Juju Smith-Schuster, Chase Claypool, Deontay Johnson, who is supremely underrated when he's on the field, if he could just please stay healthy. Somebody named Ray McLeod, who also looks like a stud. My goodness. They really make Big Ben's life a lot easier. And while this offense just can chug along as an above average unit, while the defense can just shut down opponents, then Steelers are in good shape. Steelers are just a really solid, consistent team. Ravens still need to work out. Lamar still has things to figure out as a passer before the playoffs, if he doesn't want to get embarrassed like they were last year. But anyway, J.K. Dobbins looked good after kind of being not much of fantasy football disappointment. Showed his talent. Good for him. And moving on to the game that I really want to talk about, aside from the Packers, but Chargers, Broncos. And I can't remember if I've done this officially yet, like on the record, but I'm going to definitely apologize for Justin Herbert. The dude is a monster. I think some of the throws just speak for themselves. Like, you can look up any highlight tape. One of his touchdowns this game, I think it was like far right corner of the end zone. This is what I talk about with elite quarterbacks. Impeccable ball placement. If you froze time, walked up, and placed the football there, and placed the ball where it needed to be, that's where Herbert put it. It's ridiculous. He has one of the best arms in the league, although I think we all knew that about him coming out. He creates when the play breaks down. He plays in structure when he needs to. He still has some things to work out in terms of down-by-down consistency. In most of his games this year, he's had a couple, total WTF throws. He had one really bad pick to start. But the Chargers have found their guy. I'll say that. And while Herbert only had a 89 passer rating or whatever his stats were, technically he threw 2 picks. The second one was not his fault. I thought this was the best game Justin Herbert's ever played. And I just hope that clarifies the disparity between stats and film, because while on paper Herbert didn't play the best game of his career, he did. He just made so many just bonkers plays. I think it was a back shoulder to Mike Williams or something before halftime. And one play that I really want to highlight was, it was second quarter, second and goal from the 15 for the Chargers. I can't remember what the score was then, but Herbert gets a snap from shotgun, has pressure in his face. He kind of backs up, and as he's literally balancing on his left leg, I'm not even talking about he has his weight on his left leg. No, his right foot is off the ground. His right leg is just swinging. I don't know if that's sloppy or what, him just being sloppy or whatever, or him just being supremely talented. And he kind of angles his arm around the offensive lineman as he's throwing to his running back over the middle. That's the stuff that just makes it so fun to watch. And I want to clarify, I'm not mad that I'm wrong on Justin Herbert. If I was right about Herbert, we would not be seeing this. I'd much rather Herbert play like this, play like a franchise quarterback, than him just to be a clone of Mitch Trubisky, who by the way, is absolutely painful to watch on film. Yuck. Side note on Mitch Trubisky, I cannot believe he wasn't traded or benched in 2019. Anyway, Herbert's way better. He's so good. And now let's talk about the Chargers, who have pretty much just choked yet again. Oh, God. these are some of the most Charger games ever. And in the midst of how well Herbert's been playing, I feel like a lot of people, at least until this week, kind of forgotten just some of the excruciating losses they've had. Defense just broke. Drew Lock made the final play. You just can't make this up. I don't know what it is with the Chargers. Is it some voodoo where they cursed? Do they have their own version of the Billy Goat curse or whatever it was the Cubs had? Just not good. And moving on to the Broncos, I did not think Drew Lock was very good this game. I know that sounds, well, for 3 quarters, that is. He might be Jay Cutler, honestly. I just don't... I love Drew Lock coming into the year, especially as like a fantasy QB2, all the upside in the world option as a second-year quarterback. Just not showing the consistency. He plays with a lot of confidence. I think anyone watching him would agree on that. But I think it's too much confidence, where he just relies on his athleticism as a crutch. He doesn't play well in structure and rhythm. He's kind of like Jared Goff. He's just an impatient quarterback this year. Forcing balls deep, not making good decisions. He can be accurate downfield, and you see these flashes of greatness, and you're like, okay, there he is. That's a franchise quarterback. And he doesn't show it consistently, except for a few plays a game. Now, he was great, obviously, in the fourth quarter. I mean, what else can I say? The poise is there. The confidence is there. But is he getting to the point where he's just being cocky? I don't know, because do the Broncos consider moving on from Luck? I'm not. Well, I'm not sure what even bring that up after this game and the comeback he led, but it's just something to keep in the back of your mind if they want to compete for a Super Bowl. I don't want to talk down on Drew Luck after he led an amazing comeback and was just clutch when it mattered. And who knows, maybe that's luck. Maybe he'll be frustrating for a few quarters and then he'll just be clutch when it matters, which, I mean, you'll take that. Yeah, so that's my spiel on the quarterbacks. I'll maybe try to talk about a position that's not a quarterback next game. So moving on to the Saints Bears, and okay, I'll talk about the quarterbacks here again. Breeze just isn't quite what he used to be. I was a little overreactionary, I guess. I thought he was going to be Peyton Manning in his final year after what he showed the first couple weeks. He's not quite that, but his arm just limits what the Saints can call. Limits what Sean Payton can call. But the Saints are still a really good team. They're still really talented. They're missing Michael Thomas, which hurts, but I'm not sure really what's a weakness of them, except like maybe secondary. Malcolm Jenkins hasn't been all that great as a signing free agency signing from the Eagles. They have solid skill position players. Sean Payton knows how to use these guys well. And he doesn't ask them to do too much. I mean, he asks Alvin Kamara to do a whole lot, but at this point, I'm convinced that there's nothing that Alvin Kamara can't do. The Bears, this is why they're not as good a team as everybody thought they were a couple weeks ago. Foles he's been fine this year. He's certainly been an upgrade to Mitch Trubisky. But he still kind of limits their offense. Their offense just isn't... It's completely underwhelming. What does it do that, actually scares you? Foles has a limited arm, does not throw a good deep ball. Well, I mean, his deep ball's meh, but it's nothing special. David Montgomery is a very solid running back, but he's not going to keep defensive coordinators up at night. The receiving core is where I think you actually get talking, because Allen Robinson is an under-the-radar absolute superstar. He's seriously amazing, and this is a guy who's somehow made it work with Mitch Trubisky and Blake Bortles throwing him the football for his entire career. Could have come to Green Bay, but no, he chose Chicago, who hasn't had a good quarterback since the Stone Age. Whereas the Packers have basically had a Hall of Fame quarterback for the past, 30 years. Anyway, Anthony Miller was pretty solid this game. Darnell Mooney has still been a late-round steal from this team. He's I believe he's 5'10", I'll have to double check, but he can jump, man. Bad pun, but he's just exciting. You just see him jump up and try to catch the ball, you're like, whoa, this guy can play. Oh yeah, Darnell Mooney is 5'10". Anthony Miller looks like he's getting phased out because Mooney's been so good. But I still think he can play. Jimmy Graham, I'll talk about him. Jimmy Graham was absolutely terrible for the Green Bay Packers for 2 full years, and then is somehow experiencing a bit of a revival, whatever it is. He's just making plays that he didn't make with the Packers. I think it was, against the Colts. He hurled a man, and my jaw hits the floor, and I'm like, well, where was that for 2018 and 2019? Against the Bucks, one-handed in the back of the end zone. I'm like, why did you literally never do that once in Green Bay? When you have Nick Foles throwing you passes instead of Aaron Rodgers. Why would that... That's maddening to me. He's still probably not worth that contract they gave him, which was still bad. But anyway, the Bears offense, I spent enough time complaining about that. Their defense is still probably one of the 3 best in the league. Them and the Steelers probably might be in a category of their own. What can you say? Khalil Mack has always been a nightmare game wrecker. Always has been, probably will be for the next 3 to 5 years. Eddie Jackson is an aggressive ball-hawking safety. Roquan Smith is really developing as a cover linebacker. He was really good this game. Corners are still good. Sean Gibson, Kyle Fuller, their defense is great, but it's not as sustainable as offense is. I'd rather have a top tier offense and a crummy defense than a crummy offense and a top tier defense, if that makes sense. Anyway, but just talking about the defense specifically, their pass rush, I feel, in this game also kind of forced Breeze to get rid of the ball quick and early. Anyway, yeah, the Bears, they're good. They'll probably make the playoffs, I'd imagine. And especially in a 17 playoff, they'll might make it out of the NFC North now that the Vikings are probably out of it and the Lions are the Lions. Moving on to Niners Seahawks. Russell Wilson for MVP and DK Metcalf is an absolute beast. My goodness. And the Niners season basically ended in this past week. They lost. I'll have to Google their injury report. This whole year, they lost Nick Bosa, week 2, who is one of the best edge rushers in the league. I think losing him was honestly just really, that was just horrible for them. Because there's so much he can do as a game wrecker if you leave him one-on-one. And if you don't have that defensive line got a lot less scary quickly because they lost DeForest Buckner in the offseason, traded him to the Colts. I get it, they couldn't afford him. They drafted Javon Kinlaw to replace him, but it's not going to be DeForest Buckner immediately. They're just trying to get some value out of Buckner while they could because they couldn't pay him. Let me see. Has D Ford been injured? I feel like more players have been injured than not. So he was out. He's out indefinitely with a back injury. So that's your other edge rusher, and losing Nick Bosa hurts, and suddenly your defense is like, your defensive line at least. With Sherman getting up there in age, you can't always rely on him anymore to be that real lockdown corner. Well, he's still playing well. Probably won't be playing this well in 2 years. Then you lose this past week Garoppolo and Kittle. Yikes. Garoppolo, I've been a bit of a skeptic of his lately. I just still think he leaves a lot to be desired as... Well, I shouldn't say a lot to be desired. I just think he's sporadic downfield, straight up. I mean, he just can't consistently capitalize on deep passing opportunities. But anyway, losing him obviously really, really hurts. He's still a smart quarterback, and patient, I will say. Now you have Nick Mullins, who looked like Nick Mullins on Thursday. You lost Debo. Ayuk is hurt. Kendrick Bourne was on the COVID list. Their season's probably done. Unless, if they make the playoffs, just give Kyle Shanahan Coach of the Year, the second week 17 is over. If they somehow make the playoffs. Because with the roster they have, their practice squad, I just don't see it. Moving on to the Seahawks, Russell Wilson is playing like the best quarterback in football this season. I still think Mahomes is a better player on the whole, but Wilson's just having a better year. can I say about Wilson that hasn't been said? But also I feel he is a kind of underappreciated. He's remarkably accurate downfield, throws the best rainbow moonshot deep ball ever in the league. And to make it even more unfair, when his connection with Tyler Lockett was already terrifying because of their chemistry, you give him DK Metcalf, who they got somehow in the second round, with the last pick in the second round, who is on the fast track to becoming Megatron 2.0. Why was this allowed to happen? Did they not realize that Russell Wilson was really good and that him with DK Metcalf would just rain terror on the NFC West for the next 10 years? Wow. Anyway, DK Metcalf is an absolute freak of nature. I'm not sure what else I could say about him. His blazing speed, I guess my one thing, I wish he used his physicality a little bit more, but he's developing in that area. He plays a lot like a speed receiver, which you're allowed to do when you run a 4-3, where you just run by people. But DK's phenomenal. So the Seahawks, if they're getting, I'm not sure when Jamal Adams is coming back. He's supposedly returning against the Buffalo Bills, so Adams will make that much difference for a defense that has been below average this year. And he's Cam Chancellor reincarnated in Seattle, of all places. He does actually make that much difference for a defense. Hey, look at the Jets. They would have been screwed without Jamal Adams, and now we're seeing how bad they are. He does so many things for you. Slot corner, just nickel linebacker, box safety, but can play in center field, edge rusher if you really need it. He makes that difference for a defense. He's one of the smartest players in the league in terms of knowing what the offense is going to do pre-snap. And I think his athleticism and leadership kind of speak for themselves. I love Jamal Adams. He's so awesome. And I am glad that he got freed from the New York Jets, especially when they just seem to keep hitting new lows this year. Moving on to some less fun subjects to talk about the quote-unquote primetime battle with this primetime snooze fest in the Cowboys and Eagles. Well, the Cowboys practice squad against the Eagles practice squad. Why was this game not flexed? Yuck. This was disgusting. You think I want to watch Ben DiNucci on primetime NFL? No. Do you think I want to watch two teams that have no right to go to the playoffs, one of which probably will, probably the Eagles? No. The Cowboys' defense has not been as pathetic as they have been all season, but the Eagles playing down to their competition again. By all accounts, the Eagles should have won by 40 points. But it seems that there's a lack of preparation thing with them. I don't know. They're just sloppy. Completely sloppy. They're one of the most sloppy teams in the league, is the best way I can think to put it. Carson been getting crucified all year, some of it justified. One thing I will say, he has never looked like this since his rookie year. He just seems to have regressed dramatically, and while the play calling just isn't helping, Carson isn't doing himself that many favors. Well, I still think he's a good quarterback. I mean, I'm not going to just throw out 2017, the film he put out from 2017 through 2019, and just pretend that never happened. He's been really inconsistent, just to say the least, this year. For the first 3 weeks for Carson Wentz, he was legitimately terrible. Like, hot garbage backup quarterback. And I was just completely baffled. I was wondering if his evil twin was taking the field. They seemed to stabilize, put up some good games in the following weeks. He had that clutch final drive against the Giants on Thursday night, quote-unquote, football. Again, why NFC East prime time? But he had that, again, clutch drive against the Eagles, threw a dime, a laser to Boston Scott to win that game. He was just shaky this game. I didn't think he was actually, like, bad. He had some terrible moments, for sure. I think the Eagles are also kind of using him wrong, too. This year, it's just weird. I don't know if it's just me, but they seem to be running him more than they have in years past. And I'm not a fan of that. Because Carson Wentz, well, I think the injury concerns are overstated. Like, he's not the most reliable guy for health. Like, why are you running him this much? I don't get it. It's almost like they're running the offense that they're preparing to run for if Jalen Hurts were to be the quarterback. I don't think it's time to bench Wentz for Hurts. I think a change of the coaching staff might do him some good, because he just has not gotten any better, just regressed since Frank Reich left. So, yeah, Doug Peterson, it seems there's just such a lack of preparation. They playing down to their competition. They're such a frustrating team. My gosh. I almost can't wait to watch them just get blown out in the playoffs. Maybe that'll get Doug Peterson fired. I just think he's been pretty bad this year. They have a nice receiver in Travis Fulgham, who was on the Packers at one point, but why would they add a receiver that would actually help their team? But he looks good. Aggressive at the point of the catch. Physical receiver. He seems to be the only guy on the field that Wentz actually trusts, because Wentz seems to be trying to do a lot himself. But lately it seems like he trusts Travis Fulgham, which is good. That's encouraging. Do I have to talk about the Dallas Cowboys? Metanucci's a backup. Zeke looks just fed up. Get it? Fed up. Because feed Zeke. Anyway, okay, I'll stop. They're just done. Do you fire McCarthy now? Or, well, probably not. I think you just want... At this point, you're looking for that top 5 pick. They technically have a chance to make the playoffs. I would be furious if I were a Cowboys fan if they made the playoffs. Because that means their pick went from, like, pick 7 to pick 20 when they need... Well, I'd want a top 10 pick. They still have a talented roster. What they mostly need is an actual coach. I have no idea why McCarthy was hired. Mike Nolan has been probably the worst defensive coordinator hired in recent memory. Maybe I'm forgetting some people. it's just been bad. If I'm Jerry Jones, I'm just writing a letter of apology to Dak for hiring this terrible coaching staff and tanking the season effectively. Just and write him a check for $150 million and just blow it up and maybe send him somewhere. Again, maybe the Colts when they're done with Rivers. Or, maybe the Panthers. That would be very interesting. Anyway, yeah. If I'm a Cowboys fan, which I'm not, I don't really like the Cowboys. I'm a Packers fan. But, again, if I'm a Cowboys fan, I would be furious if we did not hire Joe Brady. You don't go for these old, stale hires with these stubborn coaches who are terrible. Hire somebody at least a bit creative, please, who will inspire some excitement in these players. These players are done with McCarthy. They were done like 6 weeks ago. Anyway. I still feel so bad for Dak. I hope he can go to a real football team, please. Maybe he can go to the football team. I don't know. Is there more of a football team than the Dallas Cowboys are? Yuck. Okay, I said this would be quick. I lied, apparently. Last game, I promise. Bucks, Giants. Daniel Jones ain't it. He was pretty bad this game. And right when I was really getting intrigued, he had a beautiful throw to Golden Tate for the touchdown at the end of the game. Put it right up only where he could get it. Golden Tate, I mean, he's not, I believe, is he even 6 feet? No, he's 5'10", too. He's 5'10". But yeah, great throw by Daniel Jones on that one play. That's the best I could say about him that night. He still has no spatial awareness. He converted a fourth down by accident this game, literally, where it was on that final drive. He ran backward, or literally ran into his tackle and the guy he was blocking, and just yucked it up. I'm convinced he was throwing it somewhere. Sterling Shepard worked back to it and caught it, but Daniel Jones was not throwing to Shepard there. When I saw the all-22, I'm like, oh, he's not even looking. He has no idea what he's doing. He's just has no spatial awareness at all. And he will pretty much, it's a given that he'll turn the ball over twice every game. Just death taxes. Daniel Jones, 2 turnovers per week. If you in the NFL, you settle on a quarterback if they're exceptional. They still bring stuff to your team. They don't just, they're not just inconsistent. They don't, are at least above average. They have to be at least above average. I can't say that about Daniel Jones. He's too boomer bust for me. And that 2-point conversion, just laid on the throw. I'm not really going to get into whether that was offensive pass interference. That's not even a discussion if Daniel Jones is on time. He still got some plus traits. He has an actual solid arm, and he can make some tight window throws downfield. He's a decent rhythm player, I believe, too. And the Giants have a coach, too. They're getting there. And they'll probably have a top 5 to 10 pick this year. I mean, their defense is playing better than their record shows. But if you can add maybe a top 5 to 10 pick, and if you can get Lawrence or Fields, you're talking about an actual playoff contender in historically bad NFC East. that I have every reason to believe will be terrible next year. Lawrence or Fields on the Giants? Whew. I'd be hyped, my goodness. I think Jones is still, like, a fine quarterback. He's kind of, like, in that Baker Darnold, where, like, probably one of the 32 best quarterbacks in the league, just not the guy, the franchise guy that will bring us much playoff success and lead us to the promised land. And you don't want to stick with these guys too long. Take a look at, like, Blake Bortles, Mitch Trubisky. Well, granted, they were worse players, but still. The Bucs side of things, Brady is basically as good as he ever was. I never understood all the Brady is done talk and panicking after they lost week 1 to the Saints in a season with no training camp for time to develop a chemistry with an entirely new team for the first time in like 20 years. He's always been like one of the, I mean, I still believe he's one of the 5 best guys in the league. And look, I'm not, maybe not be like a Tom Brady quote unquote fan. I don't like actively root for the guy, but I have to respect what he shows on tape. The consistency, the preparation, the ball placement deep downfield is as consistently good as it pretty much ever was. He looks the same as he did about 10 years ago. And he's got much better receivers to throw to, and he's getting Antonio Brown, which is all kinds of unfair. My gosh. Talk about, like, I mean, like, don't get me wrong, like, if you want to get into, like, Aaron Rodgers versus Tom Brady, like, Brady's been pretty spoiled this year. Mike Evans, well, Chris Godwin hasn't been all that healthy, but he has him on the team, who I think Chris Godwin is under the radar, one of the 10 best receivers in the league, one of the best route runners, pretty much always open. Like, if you're a corner, how do you cover the guy? And Mike Evans, one of the freakiest deep threats in the league. A jump ball in his area is almost a win, pretty much almost always a win for Mike Evans. Gronk has been actually balling out for like how Gronk looked a couple years ago with what we thought was the end of his career. And he had O.J. Howard. Unfortunately, O.J. Howard tore his Achilles, I believe, injured. That sucks, but Brady's got targets now, and now people are really saying that, like, oh, he's, like, you're throwing potential MVP conversation. Well, he was always this good. The receivers in New England were just outright terrible, and he didn't well, at least Rodgers had Devontae Adams to carve up bad teams once in a while. Yeah, Brady had nobody once they put a bracket on Edelman. Just nobody. So I have a lot of respect for Tom Brady. He is as great as he pretty much ever was. Moving on to non-quarterbacks, finally. Running game is still a little inconsistent. I feel like a lot of that was just the Giants playing like a cohesive, well-coached team. The players seem like they're buying into Joe Judge. Tough to consider this running back room for fantasy purposes. Like, Fournette got more carries than Jones. I think Jones had a fumble, which kind of put him in the doghouse for a little bit. But anyway, Tampa is a terrifying team for January. If they're clicking and Tom Brady doesn't lose his arm strength overnight, They're probably my favorites for the NFC. I think like you could throw Seattle in there. Seattle's defense isn't as good right now, at least. We'll see how much Jamal Adams really elevates them. I think it'll be a lot, but I still think that roster has holes. The Packers will not be a playoff contender until they get more than one pair of hands on that freaking team. Rodgers and Adams will just make terrible teams look like terrible teams. They'll make them into fools. But in the playoffs, I'm very still pessimistic, probably. I'd say realistic, but I just think playoff teams will be smart and double Adams. That's how you beat this team last year. Get somebody on Adams, or if you have a true lockdown corner who can maybe shut him down. Speaking of lockdown corners for the Green Bay Packers, Jair Alexander left the Thursday game with a concussion. Forgot to mention that. He's been playing probably the best corner in all of the NFL this year, so it sucks that he got hurt. He's their best defensive player, maybe third to fourth best player on their entire team. If you're talking about Rodgers, Adams, Aaron Jones, Jair, he's a stud. An actual draft pick that Brian Gutekunst got right. True. All right. So that's a Week 8 recap. I went over a little long. I was mostly just going to complain about the Packers' inaction at receiver. But I just mostly wanted to talk about most other teams' quarterbacks. So hope you enjoyed the listen, and see you next week.